welcome everybody to our Q&A. Thanks for coming here today. So obviously it's Q&A. So we're going to start a line over there and just come on up here and ask your question to the mic. And I think, of course, we didn't clear this before we started, but I think we'll also have paper and pen. We might have paper and pen. We'll try to arrange paper and pen. So that way, if you don't want to actually ask your question into the mic, questions will be brought to me. I'll ask them, and then you don't have to worry about it.
If you want to be shy, but you still want your question answered.
And we got minimum 90 minutes. So if you have more than one question, jump back in line, and we'll just keep going through. So we'll just start over here. Anybody who's ready to go,
everyone
head on over.
Get in line. Everyone get in line.
Don't be afraid. There are no dumb questions.
Yes, there are.
Unless they involve Vince Russo. Or if they cause Dave to do that. All right, come on up.
So with TV rights that the WWE got, and like UFC with Bellator, just getting like that streaming contract, what wrestling promotion you think might be able to get like a big TV contract? Oh, my name is Tim.
And you're from?
Chicago.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, there's no the two ones. I mean, what would you say right now? The number 2 and number 3 companies, as far as this market goes, would be New Japan and Ring of Honor, right? Mm-hmm. So they would have the best chance. So it just depends. It depends on like a TV executive with power who looks at this and just goes, wrestling's a good long-term play because if you have a successful wrestling franchise, it's like, like a sport, it can go forever. It's not like a TV show that after 4 years people get tired of. And it can draw a pretty solid base audience when it's good. When it's bad, it'll lose its audience. So, and I think that we're in a growth period of non-WWE wrestling for sure. So it's just a question of someone in the TV industry figuring all this out. Like, if somebody shows up here and sees all these like T-shirts and everything, or think about this. What if like some famous TV executive just happened to be in that hotel down the street and he's looking around at all this? He might be going like, whoa, golly, you know what I mean?
They have WGN tonight too, so that could do a great number, and they might be interested.
If it actually does.
And if it does a great number, there could be someone else interested that's not with WGN that just sees a number.
Right. But I mean, like the whole Young Bucks Hot Topic thing was because there were some people, from Hot Topic walking around in New Orleans at WrestleMania and seeing all the Young Bucks shirts and going like, they went to WWE and go like, how come you're not sending us those shirts? And they had to go, and they had to actually say, they're not our guys. And then, it ended up.
Anyone get their stuff here from Hot Topic? Ah, look at that. There you go.
Not me.
Cool. All right.
Spencer, I'm from Oxford in the UK. My question was just, is there any news on Filthy Tom and his MMA career? And if not, I just wondered.
What is going on with? I mean, I've been in touch with him, but you are more than me.
I just wondered if he can't go back to UFC, then where's sort of best for him to go? Is Bellator the obvious choice, or is
Bellator would be the obvious choice. But if he went to Bellator, he would probably end up staying in Bellator for a long time. If he went to like something like Legacy and won like 3 fights in a row, UFC would probably bring him back, I would think. So it depends on what his goal is, and I think if he had the chance to go to Bellator, he probably would. But I don't know. Have you talked to him?
Yeah, I mean, I can ask him again on Wednesday's show, but I guess he just said that he's been getting calls, but there's nothing, like it doesn't seem like Bellator's called, which is astounding to me.
It kind of is too.
Yeah, he's like a perfect fit for Bellator because he's
colorful.
Yeah, he's got a character. He's a good fighter.
He's a good enough fighter for them. Yeah.
Yeah, he could do great interviews and everything like that, but nothing right now. So just pro wrestling, and he's gotten offers. Like I think he said on the show. Hopefully, I'm not getting him in trouble. But the Bare Knuckle people had contacted him, Bare Knuckle FC or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And so
he'd be a good fit for them, but I don't know if that's the best thing for him.
Yeah. So there are options out there, but
good, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Vince from Las Vegas.
Okay.
First of all, huge fan of the both of you. You guys are awesome.
Thanks.
Second question. So, the star rating system.
Oh, okay.
Hot button topic, I know. So, in relation to New Japan, one of the things I've noticed about how you rate your matches is history going into the matches, right? And New Japan,
not necessarily. I don't. But I mean, if you do a match that builds off stuff from other matches, yes,
Exactly.
But I don't go in with the idea of, because it's the middle of a great feud, the match must be great. I never think like that.
right? But that's kind of what I was getting at. The building off of previous matches.
Yes, that plays into it. Yeah.
New Japan and the way Gato books his shows and his matches and his wrestlers has this wonderful propensity for building off of everything that's happened before it. Prime example was the Okada-Tanahashi feud from the 3 Wrestle Kingdoms back to back. And like, my question basically is, does the star rating system really work still in a system where Gato's set it up so that every major feud and every heavyweight title fight and every bout between a specific group of wrestlers is going to always be 5 stars? They've got
It's never always going to be 5 stars, but I know it's getting like too much. It's like these guys are getting too good. I need to start telling these guys like miss some moves, like slip on the ropes. Like don't make me do this every week.
their game is so tight, and the storytelling going into it and the thing that's built off of, it's almost like the system is kind of gamed at this point. At least that's what I think.
I don't know about game, but I mean, I do have to say this. It's really weird to me that people are mad because the wrestling's gotten too good. And I'm not. I'm happy. I'm happy that these guys are elevating this art form to a new level and having these matches that like they go like, oh, how could you say this match is better than anything in WWE history? And it's like, because it is, I mean, it's like, Bret Hart and Steve Austin was an absolutely fantastic match. It was great storytelling and all this. These guys are at a way different level, and I mean, that's just the reality because they're older and they've learned from the past and they study tapes of everywhere. The guys that were great from their era are great, but it's just like in any sport. It's just. And this one's growing exponentially because of YouTube and because these young guys study so much and they think so much about their matches. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like, I think because WWE storytelling has been just whatever it's been for so long, and because New Japan is so good, like what you're describing for New Japan, like where the matches build off each other and there's a story, like that's how it's been in wrestling forever.
Forever, yeah.
That's like the whole idea of wrestling. Yes. And it's just because WWE has done it so poorly. I mean, it's not like this star rating system has to be broken because another company is actually doing what pro wrestling is supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like this is a bad example, but one of my favorite matches, and you didn't even give 5. Maybe you did. I didn't. I don't remember. But anyway, the Hell in a Cell with Undertaker and Shawn Michaels.
I gave that 5 stars.
I love that match. And if you go back a few months, like it all begins where they had that SummerSlam where Shawn's the referee, or whoever, I don't even remember who the ref, but the point is, yeah, it was Shawn. Because Shawn swings a chair at Brett and he hits the Undertaker. There's a title change. They go to the next show. Shawn's beating the hell out of him with a chair. This whole chair feud, the whole chair aspect of that built all the way up to Hell in a Cell. They do the whole match, and the very end of the match is Undertaker gets that chair, and he gives Shawn, unfortunately, an unprotected chair shot to the head. Shawn's dead. It's like, that's it. That's the end. And then, of course, the lights go out and Kane shows up and everything like that. But that was a story that, like, they had an idea that was months in the making to build up to that Hell in a Cell where it wasn't just a cage match where a dude whacked a guy in the head with a chair. That chair shot was built up from SummerSlam. So that's just like one example from WWE. Like, they have done this before, but you're not going to get that today.
So I'm glad you actually mentioned that because I want to point to a match that didn't get 5 stars. The second WrestleMania match between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Mm-hmm. That is a story that was built from the last year's WrestleMania.
Yeah, for the year, yeah.
And
I actually like the one year before better than the second one, though.
Right. It's a better wrestled match, but like the story going into it, the drama, the intensity, the knowledge that Shawn Michaels' career is over there and in hindsight has been over since, I feel like that's definitely the level of storytelling we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the work is still It's not as good as
it's
the
not
year
as
before.
good, but it's really good. Yeah, but I didn't give that 4.5 or 4 3/4. That's pretty great. You know, I mean, now it's average. Isn't that what they?
It's not
Kenny
average
Omega said?
anymore. It's not average anymore.
That's what Kenny Omega said.
It is.
4.5. That's just average.
Hey guys, Joel.
Oh,
I'm too loud. Joel from Detroit.
yes.
I got a question about New Japan in the States, because you talked about this a little yesterday. They're not putting their big matches on in the States.
well, they will. They will.
But they're going to have to. My
Yeah.
question is, are they afraid of cannibalizing Japan or taking away, the big matches from Japan, and they don't want to do them in the States? Because it just seems like there's been 2 heavyweight title matches in the States, and they both had Cody as the opponent, and it was kind of like,
Okay, so-
why don't they do, because I feel like the fans of New Japan really want that thing. They really want to see like a Dominion type show, and they're not getting it because they're getting Ring of Honor guys on the undercard, and they're getting, stuff that's just a little bit watered down. And is it fear on them? Like they could have done, like when they first did Long Beach, you were reporting that might be the first 2 nights of G1, which would have been like blowaway shows.
But they did
and then they did what they did, and those shows were good. They were good shows.
The U.S. title tournament ended up being really good.
It was
though.
really good. I was there. I flew out for that thing,
Yeah.
and it was great. But it seems like some people are not into it as maybe they would be.
Okay, so the Okada-Cody match, they believed, because Gedo grew up studying American wrestling, and the idea of, like Ric Flair versus, Rick Martel that they did in Japan, or Harley Race against Bob Backlund. He thought that was like this thing, and it's like, how do we do this in the United States? And that was Okada and Cody when Cody was Ring of Honor champion. So he thought champion versus champion is that special thing, and they never get that in the United States anymore like they used to get in that period. So that was the idea behind that one. The when they did the other Long Beach, which was Omega and Ibushi against the Young Bucks, they thought that for the United States that was just like a fantastic match that they had built and all that. And I actually thought they went a little quick, but they just thought that was it. And then the last one, Omega and Cody, Cody had beaten Omega in before Omega won the title. Cody had just beaten Kota Ibushi. So from their booking standpoint, that was a big match. So, but there is the mentality of, we want to feature the Americans in the United States. And I don't know, I know people, I talked to Mike Tenay about a week or 2 ago, and it was about the Cow Palace show, and he was just like, yeah, it was a good show, but I want to see like New Japan. I don't want to see, that show where it's all about putting the Americans over. He wants the authentic, and he thinks that the people who are New Japan fans want the authentic, but New Japan is thinking, by expanding into the U.S., we have to focus on Americans, not at the, detriment of the Japanese. So it's a balancing act. There's a little bit of both. I mean, I do think you have to put the Young Bucks over stronger in the United States, and I think that you probably would rather feature Omega as the focal point as opposed to Okada. But I do think that the idea of like that, Tanahashi versus Suzuki match, or Suzuki versus Ishii match, or something like that, that's Japanese versus Japanese, that classic match. I do think that people that watch the New Japan shows, they really want at least one of those matches on the show. So I think that they do need to think like that. Yeah.
Noel from Ireland. Just want to ask you, it's well documented Austin shouldn't have turned in 01.
In 01, yeah.
What should they have done booking going after? Because he wouldn't have had a lot of opponents lined up. And how long do you think the ratings would have taken to decline? Because that seemed inevitable after WCW.
Yeah, I think there was inevitability. You
Thanks.
can keep it at that level forever, unless all of a sudden another Steve Austin showed up, and everyone's got a shelf life. But I mean, as far as I'm trying to think back, I mean the idea was for Triple H to turn heel, to turn babyface, and Austin to go heel, and then Triple H didn't want to turn, and then Rock left for the movies. But Austin was too strong as a babyface, and I just think that
Yeah, they were in a tough spot because Rock was leaving, but I mean,
but Austin turning was the wrong.
You didn't have to turn Steve Austin.
I was writing about it, complaining because I knew they were doing it.
Yeah, because
I was told in February that they're turning, and Austin wanted to turn, and I knew that he would know if I wrote it this way. And it's like, and Vince too. It's like, don't turn. And they'd go in all these cities with Austin and Rock, and and they were always, the fans were always for Austin, not Rock. And it was just like, I knew, like, there's certain guys that and maybe like 10 years later, Austin could have turned, but it was way too early. And I kept thinking, like, Austin is like a Bruno Sammartino. He brought people in, and do you realize how absolutely ludicrous ever at any point turning Bruno Sammartino was? And it was just like, people would go, like, because of Hogan, but Hogan was so different. Hogan was like this. Hogan was big, but he also, like, there was underlying stuff with Hogan that people didn't like, and also it'd been so long that he was stale at that point. Whereas Austin, it still had only been a couple of years. I mean, he had. And I don't know, I mean, maybe 5 years later, Austin could have turned, but I knew that when he turned, a lot of those people who came in, like, they came into wrestling for Austin and Vince McMahon, and that's the one thing they believed in. It's like they knew wrestling wasn't real, but they were so set on Austin versus Vince McMahon. And then when they're together, it was like, that was just like, okay, everything we watched was bullshit, just like the rest of wrestling. And that's when you saw the ratings go down and the attendance go down. And the merchandise went way down.
Hey, Jason from Chicago. First of all, thank you guys for coming out and doing this. It's really great. So Bruce Pritchard and Jim Ross have talked about on their podcasts kind of separately that when guys were coming in, they were encouraged to finish up their dates and complete their commitments for coming in.
In other companies?
No, to other companies.
Before they come to WWE?
Yeah.
That's not always true.
Yeah, so...
in many cases, that's completely untrue. I mean, look at Ray this last month.
Yeah, exactly. So is it an assessment of a revisionist history, or is it an example of just changing mindsets? Like, because the Hardys and Edge have both talked about in their books when they first started in the late 90s that they were encouraged to do that, but
they
with
were nobodies.
Ray,
they were nobodies. There's a big difference. It's like, if you're an independent guy, why burn bridges? But if you were Junkyard Dog working for Mid-South Wrestling, or something like that, it's just like, hey, get out of there, don't do any jobs on the way out. Or Hulk Hogan in Minneapolis. I mean, there was definitely don't do this. Just sneak off in the middle of the night and don't even tell them. Right. Jesse Ventura, because he hated Vern. Jesse Ventura made a deal now, my days of the week may be wrong, but he made a deal I'm just going to say this, the days may be wrong, but this is essentially what happened. He made a deal with Vince on Tuesday, okay? He knew it. And just because he hated Vern so much, he showed up on Wednesday for interviews, and he did interviews for a month's worth of stuff, all over the circuit. And then on Thursday, he sent Vern a telegram, I'm with Vince. And to Vern's credit, he played all those interviews anyway. And Jesse probably figured that he would, because he thought short term, it's like, well, I got the interviews and they're good interviews. And if he doesn't show up, who cares? And it's like, and that's what hurt Vern's business. But absolutely those guys were, in that era, they were all told, guys like Piper and Steamboat that did fulfill the dates, it's because they insisted on doing it. It's not because, now, yeah, like you said, when you're working low-level independents, of course you were, because a guy like Edge and Christian, just as an example, it took them months after they signed, before they were even integrated into TV. So of course you might as well fulfill it, but that's a completely different era than when you were taking, Junkyard Dog from Mid-South, or you're taking Hulk Hogan from Minneapolis.
And related to that, so Deonna Purrazzo, probably a recent example of that. I know she is, probably most everyone here knew she was, but I wouldn't call her a major star. So would her not being able to fulfill have to just do with All In and not wanting her on the show?
They wanted her in Orlando to start training. And once you're in Orlando, they don't want you doing stuff. But, that's not the end of the world, because Matt Riddle is there and he's going to work Progress, but that's because Progress is their friends. Right. But yeah, Matt Riddle was probably going to win Battle of Los Angeles. He had made that commitment, and it's not like he could do it. Once he made the commitment, you're done everywhere. Yeah, so it's, even now you can see the examples every single time. These guys that have bookings after their WWE start date, it's not like they can go back. Alberto, remember when Alberto went to when he was a AAA champion, and he told AAA he was going to go back. You know, and I mean, who knows with Alberto and WWE? I heard different stories from both sides. But the point is that he was world champion. He couldn't go back and lose the title. I mean, and you know, and you would think if you're going and wanting to do business, you would respect the idea that this guy's the world champion of a major organization. You're bringing him in as a surprise. AAA didn't even know about it until I think Alberto actually gave him the notice, maybe either the morning. I think it was the morning of the show that Alberto told AAA, "Oh, I'm going to show up on this WWE pay-per-view, but don't worry, I'm going to come back and drop the title, you know, and I'm going to fulfill all my TVs." And he didn't fulfill any of them. But there's an example right there. If that what those guys said is true, wouldn't they go and say, "Alberto, you're booked on 4 more TVs for AAA. Drop the championship, be professional," and you know that's just the right thing. And obviously that didn't happen.
Hey, I'm Zach from Portland, and I want to talk about Portland, actually. We haven't had a WWE pay-per-view, I just looked it up, in 10 years.
Wow.
In Portland, Oregon. Last one was No Mercy with Michaels and Jericho in the main event.
Well, it was a good match.
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah.
But it kind of feels like wrestling isn't at its peak that it once was in Portland at all.
I think nationally it's kind of like where it is. It's consistent almost everywhere now.
Yeah. We have a small indie that's there, but it feels like even in like the Seattle area with Defy, like those kind of companies are exceeding expectations. Around us, it kind of feels like a lot of people who are like stuck in the past, and like the wrestling shows don't have many young guys, and there's a lot of like we have Gangrel in our town, and that's like our main guy on the card. So, would you know anything of like why WWE hates us even?
Well, no, WWE doesn't hate.
Yeah, Dave can tell you about WWE.
Yeah, no, WWE doesn't hate anyone. I think it's just a matter of scheduling. You know, I mean, when they do a pay-per-view, I mean, it seems to me that they have whatever it is, maybe about 20 cities that they want to do their pay-per-views in. Like San Jose, we get one like almost every other year or every year. And for whatever reason, there's, you know, it's like they don't really go to, you know, so I think it's just not on the list. I don't really even know why. And maybe just routing. Like with San Jose, you can do, you know, TV in like Oakland and Sacramento, and they're easy drives. Whereas with Portland, you know, it's what would be Seattle, Tacoma, and that's not as easy a drive.
Well, I mean, it's weird because like WWE will run in Seattle, and then they'll go to like Yakima, and then Spokane, which is, I mean, I live in Washington. It's bizarre to me. Why are you going there? It's not that hard to drive. It's 3 hours to Portland from Seattle.
But they do house shows in Portland. They don't
yeah,
do, and they don't.
And I don't know why they don't do TV there. But as far as like the indie wrestling in Oregon, I don't know why you have Gangrel. You have to ask the promoter. But I mean, in Seattle, the wrestling scene in Seattle was absolutely atrocious forever, and it was just Matt's a smart guy, and he's a promoter, or he's not the promoter, but anyway, he helps run Defy, and I'm sure he's been an Observer reader forever, Matt Farmer.
He's a historian.
He was a worker, so I'm sure that he just looked at what's PWG doing. Find some hot names, bring them in, mix them in with your young guys. Your young guys get over, let them start working with those guys. That's all it is. You just have to have a promoter that's going to look at things that way and not look at Gangrel's a name. He's going to draw. I have nothing against Gangrel, but just saying, clearly it's not lighting your world on fire.
Hey, I'm Lance W. from Chicago.
Hey, what's going on?
Good to meet you finally, Brian. I'm a Jim Crockett fan. Mm-hmm. Dave, you said that the best tag team matches you've seen were All Japan.
Yeah.
What was the best Carolina Mid-Atlantic tag team match that you'd ever seen?
I'm thinking there was a Ric Flair and Barry Windham against the Midnight Express match that was on one of the Clash of the Champions. But I mean, as a general rule, I mean, Steamboat and Youngblood, Slaughter and Kernodle matches that, I mean, none of them are on tape except for maybe one. Everyone raved about them. And I'm sure there was like all this great stuff in the 70s. In the 80s, the best stuff I saw was Rock and Roll and Midnight Express, and Rock and Roll and Tully and Arn, and Tully and Arn against Midnight Express. But those, and the Fantastics in the Midnight Express also, those were the best ones that I can recall off the top of my head.
And one other quick one, Undisputed Era, more Horsemen, more NWO, like a modern version.
Horsemen for sure. Don't you think? If I
They
was
got
gonna
the
compare-
trappings of the NWO though. They got the
A little bit. Yeah. The interview music is NWO for sure. But I mean, as far as like the style of the work and that's, to me, that feels more Horseman.
Yeah, I vote Horseman for the Undisputed Era. But they do have the same NWO when they do the interviews and the music's constantly playing.
Yeah.
And they're awesome.
Hi, Shane from Chicago. Quick question about I just forgot it, so I'll ask the other one.
Different
So
question.
yeah, right. So with the obviously for the last couple of weeks, Brian has been all over about Becky Lynch and that terrible storytelling.
Becky Lynch.
So, I'm listening to Chris Jericho's third book, and he's talking about his feud with Shawn Michaels where he turned heel, and it was all based on that Shawn faked an injury in the match with Batista. And
it ended up being true.
But so why wasn't Shawn the heel in that instance?
Well, the whole thing, I mean, he actually was, but I mean, I know what you're saying in the sense it wasn't. Jericho's thing is that it's actually more heat and it gets people madder when the guy they don't like is telling the truth, and they know he's telling the truth. That's kind of, and there is something to that, and I think that was the thing that he was going for, was that in the end it's going to prove I'm going to be right, but they're going to hate me so much that they're going to be even madder that I was right. So that was his mentality, because Shawn could have at that point just gone. They never could have revealed that it wasn't, but Jericho thought that the reveal, even though it does make, in theory, Shawn the liar and Jericho the one telling the truth, that because they already weren't, then they were never going to boo Shawn because he was just such a legend. At a certain point in time, certain guys, and Shawn was in that thing, you could try to turn him heel, but it ain't going to work. And I actually thought at that time when Jericho did that, I thought at the time that Jericho was at that level too, because I remember when he did it, and he didn't tell me he was going heel or anything, but when I could see it coming, I go, I don't know. I think that you're now at that stage where they like you so much they're not going to boo you. And I mean, he pulled it off though, because he changed, but he had to change. Like the old Chris Jericho doing the old character, then trying to go heel, I don't think people would have bought. But when he did this whole new character and reinvented himself, he was able to pull it off and really well.
And I remembered my other question. I was reading an article yesterday that says WWE is considering not airing the November Saudi Arabia show on the network. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard that. That actually, in some ways, makes sense, because it'd be less, it'd be a much lower profile, and they wouldn't have to do the announcing. And if it's just a house show, and they can make tons of money on the house show, and and avoid the controversy.
Plus, it's how many days after the women's show? 4
or 5 days.
Yeah, so that's gonna be hard to.
You don't want two specials
promote
that
them
close
like that.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want two big specials that close together anyway.
Hello, from Patrick from El Paso, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
My question.
Gory Guerrero, right?
I'm sorry?
Gory Guerrero. El Paso,
Gory
Texas.
Guerrero? Yeah, Eddie, all the Guerreros, yeah.
Yeah.
My question kind of touches on what we were talking about ratings. Obviously, no one's going to catch up with WWE, but do you think any promotion will ever reach the consistent heights that TNA was reaching when they were on Spike?
I mean, like 1.5 million viewers.
Right.
I think it's doable. Yeah. It wouldn't be easy because you have to build up it. But if you were on, like, say, TBS, if TBS went in there and said, we're going to come back, which is a strong enough network, we're going to come back and we're going to do wrestling on, prime time on a Tuesday night, or, well, I guess it wouldn't be Tuesday now, but say on a Wednesday night, and you promoted it well and you had a great product, I don't think you'd start out at 1.5 million, but I think you could hit 1.5 million, yeah.
So my name is Manib from Chicago, and my question is about one of my favorite wrestlers of all time is CM Punk. And in 2011, I was not watching WWE. I was only watching for Punk. I was more into TNA and Ring of Honor. However, the summer of Punk really got me back into WWE, and it made me believe, WWE has changed, because they put Cena in the sideline. It was mostly Punk being pushed. So, but however, that wasn't the case because they kind of watered down Punk and it went back to Cena versus The Rock. Was that the plan? Was the plan ever to make CM Punk to this huge main roster?
No. It was never to make him bigger than Cena. I mean, it got over much bigger than anyone expected. So I don't know how many of you guys know the story, but
This is the one from yesterday?
The one from yesterday.
Yes, this is a good one.
Okay, so when they did that promo, the idea was they thought it was going to make CM Punk into a super heel. That's the truth. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the idea. So
the pipe bomb.
The pipe bomb was supposed to be a heel. Supposed to be
so
a
this
heel
Becky
promo.
Lynch thing is nothing new. It's nothing
No,
new.
it is in the sense that they changed when they saw
They
the
did
reaction.
change.
When
That
they
is
saw
true.
The reaction, they changed. And I think
but the original thing is nothing new.
No. But that happened. But that's happened in wrestling. Look at the Honky Tonk Man. The Honky Tonk Man was supposed to be the number 2 babyface in WWE when he came in, and he went to every building. They booed him out of the building, and Vince was like, "Okay, he's a heel," and he became an effective high card heel.
Where's that Vince at?
I know. Yeah, but that's the difference. Is you know what it is? Is John Cena changed Vince. Because with John Cena, it was the proof that the cheering and the booing didn't matter because John Cena was selling all that merchandise and he was outselling everyone at the house shows as a babyface while people booed him. So to him, from that period on, it was like, well, those people don't know and I know better than them. And, you know, that's where it came from.
You know, when we did that panel yesterday, the night before we were all at some restaurant and we were trying to think about what should we talk about at the panel.
And we talked about none of it.
Yeah, none of it. One of the ideas was, who do you think are the most intriguing people in wrestling?
People in wrestling, yeah.
And obviously Vince is number one. And I was thinking about that because of that story there. Just the idea that, like, one thing can happen with one guy, and he just presumes it'll work for everybody. This is ridiculous.
But all promoters are like that.
But it just, no.
Do you know how many times Eddie Graham tried to create, copy what he did with Dusty Rhodes and Jack Briscoe?
Yeah, but that's something different. Like, the idea that throughout all of wrestling history, you got a top babyface there cheered. You get one guy that gets booed, and then you're like, well, anybody who gets booed is going to sell a bunch of merch.
Well, and yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
You're right. It was a unique situation, but he thinks Roman Reigns is the same unique situation.
Or Daniel Bryan, like they beat him and they beat him and they beat him and they beat him and they beat him, and he got over. And then it's like, well, beat everybody, they'll get over. What about the other 40 years you've been promoting and you beat everybody and they were geeks? Like, how come all of a sudden one guy, like everything's changed?
Because they have to justify the idea that they were actually smart when they're booking of Daniel Bryan, as opposed to us going like, you lucked into it. And it's like, oh no, it was a long-term plan, and we're going to show you with Sami Zayn. You know, and look at wherever Sami Zayn is, with, you know.
All right.
Hi, Brian from Lake Bluff, Illinois. Quick question about the new ECW. Pretty much, Rob Van Dam was super hot. He had been a double champion. Then he gets caught with pot with Sabu.
Yeah.
How much, and then things kind of tailspin after that. How much of a 180 did Vince do on the whole new ECW after that, or was it always kind of going to be?
It was going to end up that way anyway. I could see it from the second week on that they, you know, and I tell you, so Vince, when he did it, one of the things Vince thought was, you know, like they did a show at the Hammerstein, and I guess there were 1,800 people there, but they told everyone they had 2,500. But anyway, but Vince would say, well, those are the 2,500 ECW fans left. You know what I mean? It was that was the mentality. It's like, you know, everybody else, they got married, they got kids, they got families. All your old fans from, you know, the 90s, they moved on in their life, and these are the 2,500 left. So he never believed that old ECW fan was there. So he was going to create an ECW brand, but it was going to be with what he thought worked as opposed to what the old ECW was. And some of what the old ECW was they couldn't do anymore in 2005. You know, a lot of it they couldn't do. So it was doomed to failure, basically.
And just one follow-up, kind of from the same era. Was there ever, I remember hearing rumors, was there ever any actual interest in bringing New Jack into WWE?
I mean, I'm sure it was talked about, but I'm sure if you do the pros and the cons, probably the cons were here and the pros were here, and so that's probably why he was never brought in.
Man, Sandman, when they brought him into WCW, just got to bring this up.
Yeah.
They get the Sandman.
Yeah.
He's got his cane. He's got his garbage cans, smoking. First day in, beat him in a hardcore match.
That's right.
Yeah. Comes in the next week, beat him in a hardcore match. And then no one cared. I was just like, I mean, it was a Sandman, but
he was really over. But that was like the mentality there. It may have been like we're going to show that those cult fans who think that their guys were stars, that in the big leagues they're nobody. Which unfortunately, and that's not like it's the only time that's ever happened in wrestling.
No,
that happens all the time. So there was when Dana White, he signed Mirko Cro Cop from Pride. Actually, they bought Pride, but they signed Mirko Cro Cop. And I remember there was a wrestling fan reporter in the audience who had seen what WWE had done and what WCW had done, what all these guys had done. And they went to Dana, and they go, Dana, what if like Mirko Cro Cop comes in and beats Randy Couture? It's going to show like that Pride guys were better all these years. So, like that's not good. And he just goes, I own Mirko Cro Cop. Who cares? And that was the answer.
Okay, I'm Jim, and I'm from Appleton, Wisconsin. And my question is, all right, so Triple H has been slowly taking over more and more wrestling operations in recent years. Do you see him taking over SmackDown as we transition over to Fox eventually, pretty soon?
I mean, it's possible, especially, where no matter what Vince says, when the football starts, he's not going to be able to do as much as he does, so, in wrestling. So I could see when they start the XFL, so that's 2021? Or 2020 when they're starting the XFL. 2020. So I could see and the SmackDown starts in October 2019.
Yeah, next year, yeah.
I could see that, yeah. But I think that Vince's mentality, and I'm not sure he's wrong, is that Raw and SmackDown, while they are kind of different in some ways, I think he still considers them both main brand, and I think he probably will give, just because of the workload aspect, he probably will give Triple H more, but I still think that he will retain final veto power over SmackDown until they wheel him out and say you're done, whatever causes that to happen, or he just gets too sick, or he just one day just goes, I'm going home, which he will never do, So, but yeah, I don't think they'll give him full control, but I think that Triple H will have more control over both Raw and SmackDown, or more input, just because of the time consumption thing, at that point.
And then just to follow up on that then, do you think we'll start seeing an evolution as he takes over into a product that's more like what we're seeing with 205 Live and NXT then?
I mean, not complete, because I think that there's still the mentality that 205 Live is for a certain niche, and NXT is our hardcore brand that's like competing with the independents. Whereas WWE needs to attract, more people, so therefore it has to be. I think that they have the feeling that the product mix of WWE is the right product mix to attract the most people. That's, I think, the mentality. Now, there's no way of knowing, because nobody else has that exposure and nobody else has that star power. And so it's not necessarily the product mix is right as much as the exposure makes it the number one brand. But I do think that Triple H's mentality is more towards that. So I think that it will slowly there'll be more elements of it. But as far as like completely or something like that, I think that's going to be trial and error anyway. When he goes in, I think he's going to try a bunch of stuff, and then he's going to evaluate what works and what doesn't work, and then go from there.
Hi, my name is Vanessa from Ocala, Florida. I wanted to ask about a wrestler that there's not a lot of literature about, and see if you knew any more information. Romero Firpo.
I know Pampero Firpo, but I don't know Romero.
Pampero, sorry.
Oh, I know Pampero Firpo really well. I know Pampero Firpo. He was the mailman who did at the post office, who did the Observers for years and years. But
how about that?
Yeah, Pampero Firpo was from Argentina. And he was a really good. Randy Savage copied everything from Pampero Firpo. So all the "ooh yeah" and the guttural voice and everything, that's all Pampero Firpo. He when he was a kid, when Randy Savage was breaking into wrestling, He worked for the Sheik in Detroit, and Pampero Firpo was one of the biggest stars there, and Randy Savage copied everything from him. So Randy's a better wrestler than Pampero, though. But I don't know what else. What do you need to know about him? I
want to know more about the post office. So did he know about you?
Oh, yeah.
Did he read the Observer? Did you guys talk wrestling when you went to the post office?
No, we never talked as far as that went. But he didn't work the front desk. He worked like the back.
In the back, yeah.
Yeah, but there were, when I would go to the post office, there were pictures of him, as Pampero Firpo all over the post office. But
really?
No, I never. I mean, I can't say I never talked to him, because when he worked in San Jose, I actually did talk to him when I was in college, and that was towards the end of his career. And when he was a kid, remember I told you when Walt Harris died, Mr. Harris and all that stories? That was Pampero Firpo. Of the kids before I was a wrestling fan, the wrestler that everyone at school imitated was Pampero Firpo because of his interviews. Nobody was interviewing. There were people who imitated Pepper Gomez and to an extent Peter Maivia. Nobody imitated Ray Stevens, even though he was the big star. Not on my schoolyard. It was always, people would imitate Peter Maivia to a degree because of his fiery comeback. Pepper Gomez because he did the "what's up," like this, and then you punch the guy in the stomach, which was such a little kid schoolboy spot. And then Pampero for his interviews.
You have any other Pampero? No?
Okay.
Hello. This first thing was about Rey Mysterio. I think you said that he's finishing his indie dates this week.
Yeah, tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow's his last date, as far as I know.
I thought that Jericho had said he was going to be on the cruise, but
he's supposed to be. He will be on the cruise.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure that, because I actually did have that talked about, that there was actually a contract that he signed for the cruise, so he does have to do that one. Yeah, I believe that's the case. Yeah.
Other thing was just about the UK wrestling scene. So I was worried a few months ago when you'd said that Progress was going to be pretty much the only place using WWE talent. So Rev Pro wouldn't be able to use the WWE guys like Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne or whatever.
Right.
So I thought that was going to be the end of the scene or whatever. But then they sort of carried on by just using New Japan guys, and now they've got the TV deal to go on Free Sports.
How big is that? Is that a big deal? I haven't talked to Andy
about it.
So
that's a small channel.
Yeah, I know it's a
digital,
small channel.
but it is available. Probably a ton of houses are going to have that. So that's big.
What?
It's not London. Really? I've got it on Sky.
Oh, that sucks.
Oh, okay. It's on Sky. Yeah. It's big-ish, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right. Not as big as I thought. I thought that with World of Sport, I was going to sort of assume wasn't going to get renewed. Who knows?
Who knows? But I mean, the rating last week did pick up a lot, but I don't know if it's still enough to get renewed.
So I thought that Rev Pro being on a TV station, that's actually really good because that's actually independent style. It's not just WWE Light. That's actually really good.
Yeah. Rev Pro. I love the Rev Pro product. That's actually one of my favorite promotions to watch. From like if I watch like a 2-hour show from start to finish, I'll almost usually enjoy every single match in a different way.
I just wonder where do you see the UK scene going? Do you think WWE are just going to be like, we want Zack Sabre, and we're just going to take these guys?
Zack Sabre. I mean, I haven't talked to Zack Sabre about this in a while, but I have talked to Zack Sabre about it, and he did not have any interest in WWE at all. I mean, Zack seemed really, really happy with his life. And if you're happy with your life, he's making money. He's doing well. I mean, is he making $1 million a year? No, but you know what? You don't have to. I mean, I know people who make $1 million a year that are miserable, and I know people that make $100,000 a year that are happy as hell. And I'd rather be the happy guy than the miserable guy. What does it matter? In the end, I mean, there's advantages and everything. And I know if you have kids, there's pressures and all that. Everyone's got different things. But Zack's just a wrestler traveling the world who's getting to do his style and everything like that. Why go to WWE and have those agents go, your stuff doesn't look real or whatever, whatever they would say to get him to do their style, and he probably wouldn't be happy.
I'm Chris. I'm from St. Paul. Kind of dovetailing on that, the independent contractor status with WWE today, do you think that's something that will have to evolve in the next 3 to 5 years, either as Vince steps out of the picture and Barrios and Wilson kind of reevaluate what they're doing, and also as you try to attract talent that might say quality of life is better over here because I'll pay for hotels and cars and limit my dates versus WWE?
A lot of people never think about that. It's so, in a lot of ways, there's the travels. I mean, like if you're an independent guy, you make your own schedule. If you want your daughter's birthday off and you're an independent guy, just tell her, I'm not working that day. In WWE, if you're Randy Orton, you probably can get it off. If you're Daniel Bryan, you can get it off because everyone knows he would leave. And that's why he's been able to get, a lot of weekends off. But for most guys, you can't do that. So, there's something there. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and then the other half will be if Paul Levesque really does a global localization with NXT camps around the world. It seems really hard to tell someone, hey, I want you to go move to South America and work for our developmental league there. And by the way, you're an independent contractor, and you're basically telling them to relocate to another part of the world.
But they've done that before. When they sent guys to Puerto Rico and things like that.
But on the flip side of that, they were challenged for independent contractor things many times here. And do you think bringing in all this new talent, sometimes from outside of wrestling, these are people that are going to say, I don't care if I burn my bridge with WWE, that I'm going to sue them over being called an independent contractor because I was an American Ninja before. I don't need to go back to wrestling after this.
Well, it only takes one person, so you never know. It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing to me that in 2018 that we're
so
we
let's do a prediction. Do you and Brian think in the next 3 to 5 years that's actually going to change?
You know what?
I'll just say no and get it over with.
I mean, the odds are no, because for so long it hasn't. But there is absolutely the chance that, someone will challenge and just, want to be the, it's hard to be the Curt Flood, which is a baseball reference, of a guy who basically sacrificed his career, and the next generation, did get free agency and the salary skyrocketed and it was the best for all concerned. It's hard to be that person. I mean, put it this way. UFC fighters are going through the same thing right now, and they are there is a challenge right now to that independent contractor status in UFC. And if that wins, I do think that somebody will go. WWE is a lot. I mean, if you compare independent contractor versus employee, WWE and UFC, WWE, there are way more employees than UFC, and both really, to me, are employees and not independent contractors, because if you're an independent contractor, you should be able to work for whoever you want. If an independent contractor is like the guy who does the roof on your house, you can't say, okay, you're doing the roof on my house, you can't do any house on my neighborhood. No, you can't say that because he's an independent contractor. If he was an employee and he was your employee, you could say, you're my employee, you can't work on any houses on my yard. But with UFC and with WWE and with Bellator, they're independent contractors, yet they can't work independently.
Well, actually, let me ask a question here. Anyone actually an independent contractor building roofs? Nobody? My question is basically like, if you contract somebody to put the roof on your house, and it's like it needs to be done by the end of this week, I mean, can you hold them to not put another roof on till they're done putting your roof on? Yeah. Sure. Do you provide insurance for the person? Yeah. Do you have, what kind of agreement you have? I mean, independent contractors go into contracts all the time with each other. Yeah. But it has a lot to do with how much control you have.
But the thing with WWE is they have incredible control. They control who wins and loses. They control the costumes that you wear. They control the buildings that you go. And again, you in theory, I suppose, can take your daughter's birthday off, but really you can't even do that if you're in WWE. So if you're an independent contractor, you should be able to go, hey, I want to go on vacation with my wife to Cancun for a month. So we'll work out the date. And it's like, nobody gets to do that unless you're John Cena, Yeah. But in WWE, in UFC, if UFC, except for the week of the show, that is independent, because they're not telling you where to be, other than you have to tell them where you are for drug testing. But they can't tell you, they don't even tell you when you have to train. You train whenever you want. But they do. But they give you your schedule, and they. Yeah. I mean, there's no, to me, like, I remember there was a list of like 21 things that whatever it was. And it was like 19 of them WWE completely violated, and the other 2 they sort of did. It's sort of ambiguous. So it's like, I would think that a real challenge that WWE would lose, but nobody wants to challenge WWE. Nobody wants to do the fight. I can get it. And, everyone's, you're afraid. And in the old days when you had WCW, the fact is that they were, or TNA, they were as afraid as anyone, because the one person wasn't Daphne was going to challenge the independent contractor things. They paid her off. And it was like, none of these companies want that challenged, because it just changed too much.
Hi, I'm Max from Germany, and my question is, where did you guys met the first time, and how?
Well, actually, at the airport, right? I picked you up at the airport, so that's when we met. When I picked him up at the airport in 2001. Yeah.
And how did your working relationship started?
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I remember that one. So I had a 900 line. And back then, if you had a 900 line, I'll make this quick. If you called and spent $100 listening to a wrestling report, and then you called the phone company and said, I don't want to pay for this, you didn't have to. I paid for it.
You had to pay the chargeback.
Yes. So I had this hotline, and there was a kid, and he called every day for a few months. And the tracking is like a few months behind, so you don't find out till it's way too late. And they hit me up with this bill for thousands of dollars that I owed, and that was the end of the hotline. And Dave had a hotline, and so I faxed him, and I said, you need a guy on option 2, because somebody was leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, sure. That was it. I was on the hotline. That's how it started. That was like 98.
Yeah, but really what happened was I got the job with IATA to do...
This was after the hotline.
Yeah, this is like
a
year.
Yeah, we never really communicated much. I just did my hotline and that sort of thing. But.
Yeah, so we got I got a job with IATA to do a show. So I did the first day, and so there's no publicity, there's no nothing, other than I think I put it in the newsletter, and I think that I may not have even gotten the first one in the newsletter on time. So I'm kind of like doing this 2-hour show, just talking, and there's nobody there, and there's 1 or 2 of my friends may have called out of mercy or something, but it was terrible, and it's like, I need to talk to somebody, and I'm not even sure why, but I called you and go, just come on the show, we'll talk.
Yeah, just the first half hour, we'll just talk some news.
We'll just talk some news, and then he never left.
Yeah. That was your mistake.
He was so good and so funny that it was kind of like, okay, So that's really what it was really.
I wasn't very good or funny, but I was there.
Yeah, you were both good and funny.
At the beginning, it was terrible.
Yeah.
So somebody earlier mentioned TNA, and it got me thinking about TNA, which is never a good thing. So for a little while there, TNA was really, really high on big names, or in some cases just names, and large heel factions on top.
Yes.
You had the Main Event Mafia, then you had Immortal, then you had Aces and Eights. And if you look at it historically, I think we can all pretty much agree that those were all failures, right? Yeah.
Main Event Mafia was less of a failure than the other ones. I think Aces and Eights was a pretty giant failure. The build to the beginning of Aces and Eights I actually thought was kind of clever, but once you actually revealed who the people were, it kind of fell apart at that point.
Who's intimidated by a biker gang?
Yeah.
Of people like Nux. So my question is, if you could think of an example historically where you had a huge heel faction that actually worked, that didn't feel gross and watered down, because in the NWO's case, once it got big enough, you had the B team. Once it got to can you think of anything?
Bullet Club to a degree. I mean, and a lot of people think it's watered down and everything like that, but it's still, it's still viable after a lot of years. It's long. It had more legs than it should have.
My only disagreement about the Bullet Club is it exists in New Japan, where it isn't the singular top heel faction.
Right.
Faction warfare, which I think is actually brilliant, especially with the way they build the tag team matches and their undercard. It's fantastic. Gato's a genius. But
he's a booking genius. Yeah, he is.
Without other factions rivaling a faction. Like, the closest thing I can think of is the Nexus, and we can't call the Nexus a success either.
It could have been, though. Nexus could have been.
Absolutely could.
Nexus started out as a huge success, and then, Edge gave that story about how they were supposed to win that first match, and Cena was the one who overturned it. And it's like, I don't even know what he was thinking, But it might have been. Who knows who was in Cena's ear to do that too? I guess because they had to win the first one, and then they didn't, and then it was like. But Nexus had a chance. Look, if they signed all of the Bullet Club guys that are free agents, they have the chance to make an incredible amount of money with that type of feud. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's there. And if they do, I don't think they're going to do it effectively just because of the track record. That's what I've told people. Yeah, they would have a chance to make a ton of money, but I just look at WWE's history in these things with the WCW thing, and I just think that it's that weird mentality. They don't have the Dana White mentality of like, oh, they're my guy. What does it matter? They're still gonna have that mentality of like, we have to prove that we were always better. Look at the Triple H Sting match at WrestleMania and the whole build of that. It's like you're going back 15 years and you're trying to like revive this thing. Even Sting thought it was stupid, but that's what they did. And then at the end, it's like the war is over. It's like the war was over in 2001. Jeez.
Does it seem like WWE is expecting more out of their wrestlers after big matches than they used to? Because I think about how after the Terry Invitational, Edge and Christian next night didn't work. They had that in-ring segment. After the Triangle Ladder match, none of the teams worked the next night, and same after the first TLC. Whereas Hardys came back at WrestleMania, won the titles, they were working the next night, and then everything that's going on with Jeff after that bad swanton onto the ring apron. And does it just seem like they're not taking care of the guys after big matches like they used to?
I think that some of the ones before was to sell the match, to sell how big it was so we don't have them work. And I think that mentality isn't there as much now of selling it. I mean, because I know that like, aside from Kevin Owens, who for whatever reason, I don't know if he insists on it or what, most of the time, like when guys have these brutal matches and they want to limp and they want to be all taped up, and Vince's mentality is, why bother? And a lot of the guys get really frustrated by it because, they want to sell how big that match was the night before.
I mean, it also, I don't know how much of it might have to do with like the brand extension, like maybe because there's a brand extension now and you got 3 hours of TV, you need more bodies on the show. Yeah, whereas if there is a combined brand, it's like you can keep guys off the show because there's plenty of people.
And related to that, do you know what the mindset was to bring the Hardys back full time after everything they've been through and how beat up they are and were?
They were hot on the indie scene, so Vince wanted them, and
he wants everyone there full time.
Yeah, he wanted them, and at the same time they were in a situation where they had a chance to make a lot of money. I mean, I was it the right thing? I mean, when you look at how beat up Jeff and Matt are now. I mean, they had a couple of good years, but if they were probably working 2 nights a week instead of 4, they probably would have both lasted longer. But look, they're both in their 40s now, and they worked a really hard style, so it may have just been inevitable anyway. And they only had a couple of good years, so have the big farewell run.
Hey guys, Josh from Chicago. First of all, thank you for doing this. Thanks for all the great content. My question relates to Cody and the Bucks. So over the last couple of years, they've done things that I don't think any of us even thought were possible in professional wrestling. The merchandising, now culminating with All In, is kind of representative of this brand that they've been building. My question is really a hypothetical question because I don't think it's something that would happen. But given all the goodwill that they've built up with fans, they've demonstrated that they can put on this event, and they've attracted relatively big time sponsors for independently produced professional wrestling events. Do you think it's possible that they could use that brand power to actually start their own promotion? Like I said, I don't think that they would do it given where they're at in their careers, but have they demonstrated that they could turn that around and start their own promotion if they wanted to, with everything that they've done with this? And
they've
and
learned
what
a
been
lot.
doing?
I think that they could be you know, it's different from running a full-time business and doing one giant show, obviously. But I think that they've demonstrated, you know, the one thing they've demonstrated also in the last year or two is the ability to book people, to get people over, to book feuds in a very unique way, you know. So there's a lot of knowledge there. I think that if they had the right backing, could they be Office in a promotion that's pretty viable? Yeah, I think that they all have picked up incredible knowledge in the last 2 years of so many different aspects of running a promotion, you know, running a show, booking, and they're very creative. So, but I mean, as far as themselves funding it, it's high stakes business. I don't know about that, but being Office with the right company, if the right backer and the right TV comes along, yes, I think they could do that.
Hi, I'm John from Chicago. What do you think, in WWE's perspective, is more important in 2019? Trying to re-sign Brock or trying to re-sign Cody and the Bucks and all those guys to sort of carry on what you're saying to prevent them from doing anything further?
I think because of the Garden would be the Cody for sure, for Cody and the Bucks and Kenny Omega. Before the Garden, I would say that their mentality would be Brock. But with the Garden, I think that changes everything. I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
I mean, I think it's obviously have to be the Bucks and Cody.
Yeah, but before the Garden, I don't think he would think that. Or before this show, for sure.
Well, I mean, clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, just who's going to the Garden? Anybody here? Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Yep.
How many of you
who wanted to go but couldn't?
Yeah. How many? Of you...
There we go. Okay.
Okay. No, look. No, that's the same amount of people.
Yeah.
I mean, does that mean they could have sold 30,000 tickets?
It looks like it.
I mean, that's the one thing that we don't know about this show and the Garden is, and that's the.
Well, actually, you know what? I'll tell you why I think they could do 30,000 because the tickets for the MSG show, what was it? 80% were from the area.
75%.
75% were from the area.
Right.
So only 25% of the people were coming in for WrestleMania. So if all of you that couldn't get tickets, and you think about all the people that are flying in for Mania, I think it could have easily done 30.
Well, and here's another one. Think about all the people who just aren't thinking, and they're going to Mania, and they're going for the week, and it's Saturday night, and there's a show at the Garden, and it's like, you know, we're wrestling fans. There's a show in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
That's 5,000 people, maybe minimum, that would just walk up and buy tickets. So I think they could do 30,000, yeah. Maybe they should have booked the stadium, like the MetLife Stadium. That would have really made Vince happy. or Citi Field in you know the whatever the place the Mets play.
Hi, Brian from Oklahoma. I just wanted to know, why is technical wrestling called technical?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer. Well,
I presume just the technique of wrestling.
Well, when I was a kid, they used to call it scientific wrestling.
Scientific, yes. Leverage.
Yeah. It's probably dates back to Farmer Burns.
Yeah, or before.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tim from Chicago.
Hey, Tim.
In 2018, who you think is the best male-female wrestler and the most charismatic?
Oh, man.
Tanahashi's up there with the most charismatic. Okada's best wrestler.
Okada, Omega, and Ibushi. I'm not going to pick from the three.
Best women's wrestler in the world?
Best women wrestler in the world? Satomura. Miko Satomura. Io Shirai, maybe. In WWE, in the United States, I'd say Asuka would be, but God, she hasn't done anything since she came to the main roster other than the Charlotte match.
Yeah.
But when she was in NXT, I thought she was a better worker than like any of the guys.
Yeah.
So she's got, you know, and she wasn't necessarily working with great people. Like she was out there like with, you know, whoever she worked with, she was carrying them to great matches. So, but yeah, most charismatic now. Let me think about this. Maybe Tanahashi's pretty charismatic. Naito.
Yeah.
Let me think about this. Omega's pretty charismatic. Cena to a degree. God, Undertaker, he really is, but he's never around. I don't know. I couldn't put Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins as like most. So who else would be? AJ Styles, I wouldn't say most, but he's somewhat charismatic for sure. In his own way, Suzuki's uniquely charismatic.
He's unique. That's a good way to.
Yeah.
Uniquely charismatic.
Yeah, I think that Suzuki's. Yeah, but of all of them, you know what? I would kind of right now say Tanahashi. Yeah. Adam Cole. Adam Cole's a good one. That's a real good one. Yeah, Adam Cole's he's really something special. What? In 3 years.
Juice, yeah.
In 3 years, Juice Robinson will be. Yeah, he's getting there for sure. Hiromu's a good one.
Yep.
Yeah, Hiromu's so charismatic. No, but he is. Enzo Amore's got a lot of charisma. Yeah, but not Cass.
Let me ask a question for you guys. Is Enzo back in wrestling? Has anyone heard that? Oh, is that what it was? Because someone texted me yesterday and they said, I thought Enzo didn't want anything to do with wrestling.
No, he'll do appearances. Appearances, but he hasn't.
Okay.
But he's not doing any matches. Yeah, I think he'll be back wrestling at some point.
So, obviously, when AJ left New Japan, they were very lucky that they had Kenny Omega to step up and become the top foreigner. If the worst happens for New Japan and they lose Cody, Kenny, and the Young Bucks, who should they have right now in their back pocket? If you were Gato, who would you have as your next potential foreign ace? Would it be Hangman? Would it be Juice? Would it be someone else?
I would think that Juice and Zack Sabre would be the ones. That's where not getting Riddle probably would hurt a lot, because I think Riddle could have jumped in that role. But Riddle chose WWE.
You were talking about SmackDown going to Fox in 2019. Do you think that in 2019 the brand extension has to end? Because because Brian always quotes it, 80% of the Raw audience goes over to SmackDown, and obviously they're going to want to carry that over. So to combine the rosters and have the storylines cross over, do you think that's the best play for them, or?
I don't think they'll do it at first. If Fox's ratings go down, then everything's back on the table. If Fox doesn't get good enough ratings, yes, for sure. But I don't think they'll do it right away.
Well, they'll have to do more than 80% of Raw.
They'll have to beat Raw
on Fox. Yeah, they'll have to.
They'll have to beat Raw.
Yeah, so they're going to have to get people that are switching channels and.
But they're gonna. The thing is they're gonna have. Friday night's gonna hurt them a lot, because it is. I mean, look at what UFC and Bellator are doing on Friday nights. It's not good at all.
No.
So it's gonna hurt them more than they think. But they also are gaining.
But they did okay on Fridays before.
Yeah.
There was an audience that sat and watched that show on Fridays.
Oh yeah, but it wasn't. But much less than now, though.
Yeah.
They were struggling for 2 million viewers, and now, granted, they're not that much over 2 million, but television has waned since that period. They also will gain 20% or 25% of these homes that don't even get USA, that will now have access. So that will help somewhat. So. But yeah, I don't know the 3 million. I know that 3.5 million is the 3.3 to 3.5 million is the goal, and I think that may not happen. I think so, and at that point, if it doesn't, but it also depends on where TV is. I mean, if TV continues to fall and they stay steady, there's a lot of unpredictable things. But if they are doing weak on Friday, yes, then it'll be all hands on deck, because they have to make that thing work.
Steve from Chicago, thank you very much for doing this. So I'm much older than a lot of people here in this room, so I go back even before IATA. I heard you on a Chicago radio show in late.
Oh, with Eddie
Schwartz.
Eddie Schwartz, yeah.
You gave away the results of Andre Hogan before it happened, and I was crushed.
Well, everybody knew the result of that match. I mean, the only person who didn't know the result was Hulk Hogan.
Hogan wasn't sure. No, everybody in January knew. It was such a logical. But no, it was So go ahead, yeah.
So, question: you talked a lot in the past about how you were talking to Vince regularly in 2001 when he just bought WCW. So, if you had talked to Vince regularly now with the changing landscape in wrestling,
we'd have a hard time.
Well, but my question is, what would you want to talk to him about?
I don't know.
Oh man. Where to start?
I don't know. Becky Lynch.
I'd quiz him on last week's Raw. What do you remember from last week?
We'd probably end up talking about Jerry Graham and Billy Graham at this stage. I don't know.
What's your actual answer, though?
No, as far as like whatever the conversation is, I don't know. You know, would I?
If Vince walked in right now, what would you ask him?
How old are you?
Hi, Carl from Chicago. 2 quick questions. One, been going to Indy since about 98, 99 in the Chicagoland area, and I always noticed it's a really strong market, you know, high school gyms, etc. Kind of just hear your thoughts on to just gush on the Chicago wrestling scene. You know, it's a crossroads. You see a lot of guys as they're coming up, passing through the indie scene. So just sort of, I've always felt like it's a really strong market, you know, through the seasons. I can't recall whether it's MCW or AAW down there and smaller groups. Just sort of your thoughts on the consistency of wrestling around this area.
Yeah, I don't know that much about the indie scene. Obviously, I follow AEW.
I guess just the Chicago wrestling tradition.
I mean, Chicago is one of the legendary cities of wrestling for sure. You know, it's and I know that like with the wrestlers in WWE, in many cases, Chicago is their favorite market to work because of you know, they get the good crowd reaction, and it's Chicago is one of the favorite. And historically, you know, I mean, like if you look at the history of wrestling in a city. You know, whether it's O'Connor Rogers or Gotch and Hackenschmidt or you know, WWE was always strong in Chicago. WCW was strong in Chicago until, you know, or Crockett was strong in Chicago until the Starrcade and when the Road Warriors finished, because the Road Warriors were gigantic in Chicago. So Chicago's always been a great, you know, Vern Gagne, you know, it's always been like with the Bruiser and the Crusher. It's always been a great market, or not always, but it's. If I was going to say like New York, Chicago. Would probably be for historical purposes. St. Louis, those would probably be the biggest ones in the United States.
Cool. And then just lastly, so All In and everything that's been going on recently, I think about how in like the late 90s, Attitude Era and ECW seemed like an alternative for a lot of people who were looking for something edgier. And I think about that Attitude crowd, and it seems like a lot of the audience following, you know, Kenny and New Japan and Ring of Honor and all that kind of stuff now there's a lot of young guys, but it seems like this is another thing where there's a lot of people who are almost as much pushed away from WWE finding this. So is there like a correlation between those sort of like ebb and tides? You know, it's not competition in the Monday Night War sense, but this gives like a whole new floodgate for people who might have been disenchanted.
I think unhappiness with WWE is definitely one of the factors of this show being so successful. And I think the other factor is a more and more of an audience that's exposed to internet videos and, you know, being the elite and just respects either it's the work rate and perseverance if the guys find a reason to like the guys, or just, you know, stumbled upon the fact that these guys wrestle really good matches. So I think those are all factors in why this thing worked.
I'm Kristen. I'm from just outside Melbourne, Australia. My question is there an official contract between New Japan and ROH with their talent sharing?
I think that there's some sort of, I don't know like the details, like as far as like what's on paper and what's not. But I would presume that there's something, just because it's a pretty big business deal.
And do you see New Japan pulling back from that and launching their own way in America in the future?
I definitely see that as a possibility at some point, with the idea that if they were to get strong TV, I think that I know New Japan historically likes to have an American and a Mexican group, and I think that now a UK group. I think that's sort of just how they've always done business. But I do think that if they got real strong, they might go, okay, we're going to use this as our market. I do think that's a possibility, yeah.
Once again, Money from Chicago again. So my question is, as far as NXT goes, I feel like some of the two biggest stars were Finn Balor and Sasha. I mean, they were like, they came off of like big stars in NXT, but obviously when they got called up to the main roster, they've been booked like, as Brian says, geeks. And I was just talking to Summer Rae, actually, who's friends with Sasha, and Sasha seems like she's like frustrated and just wants
Well,
to.
if you have a lot of drive, you're going to be frustrated. That's just, if you don't care and you're just there for a paycheck, you'll probably be happier. But most wrestlers are have a lot of drive, so that's why you're going to have that frustration. Especially like Sasha's really, really hard worker, and then you kind of feel like I'm a really hard worker. I got over, especially like these guys that were in NXT and they saw that they got over, so they know they can get over. It's like, it's not that uncertainty where maybe I'm not good enough. It's like, I know I'm good enough. Why is this happening? And that's going to lead to frustration.
And I feel like what they should do with those characters, I feel like NXT should have a takeover, like a reunion takeover once a year, and bring back guys from the main roster and maybe have a one-off match, maybe like the old NXT talent versus the new NXT talent.
I think that's a great idea. I think that would be, honestly, I think that as a one of the 12 pay-per-views, not even like, it could be a WWE brand show. Like not just an NXT show, not a takeover, but a WWE brand show of, you bring up like, say, Shayna Baszler or Adam Cole or whatever that are not on the main roster, but they get to work with the main roster people. But then the booking is the problem is that from the Vince standpoint is that all the NXT people lose. So then I don't know. Then it's not a good deal. Then it's not such a good deal. But the idea of unique matchups, where you call somebody out, you get like the real good workers on, like a Finn Balor or something like that, main eventing against Adam Cole. Yeah, I think that for one show a year, that's a great idea.
As long as Vince and Kevin Dunn don't book it.
Well, yeah, that's the problem.
But that's the problem.
I think it's a great idea, but like I think also, like Dave said, I mean, part of the problem is the NXT people are probably going to lose most of the matches, and it's also like when you watch one of those Raw 1000s where they show you all the footage from the Attitude Era, and all the people are going nuts and they're going crazy, and then they go back to the building and everyone's dead quiet. So it'd be really cool, like as a standalone thing. But then I can see people getting really frustrated, like, God, that show was great. Why can't they do that with these guys?
Remember
and they go right back to TV and they're geeks again.
Do you remember the first ECW One Night Stand?
Yeah.
And it was like that show was, honest to God, that was one of the best pay-per-view shows I ever saw. Not match quality wise, but just there was something about it. The energy was there, and it was like, I remember when it was over, it's like, man, I could come up with all these marketing ideas, bring back the ECW T-shirts, revive ECW as a brand, or if nothing else, push those guys. And it was just like, when it happened, I remember like being told, and it's like, in their mind, none of that happened. It was like, it was barely referred to on TV, if you remember afterwards. And it was it was a very successful pay-per-view. And it's like, that's the problem, Yeah.
Hi, I'm Inga from Toronto. This is actually my first wrestling show I've ever been to, and I was only a subscriber in April. Yeah,
Wow,
so
awesome.
I saw that email and I thought it was a joke. I had to keep checking to make sure it was real. So thank you for this. My question, I'm a big Jericho fan, and I happened to catch on Access TV last night the match that he had with Naito, where he won the Intercontinental title. So since Jericho has said that he didn't really want to work for any other promotions or New Japan, represent New Japan in the States because of his
He's changed his mind
relationship.
on that, by the way.
Yeah, I've heard that too. But given that, I don't know how much New Japan knew about that, but having them put the title on him and that they're trying to expand in North America, I guess from a business standpoint, does that make sense if he was planning on not really representing him? Or does it matter because it's Jericho?
I think that they wanted to shock people, and they have other they want to shock people, and they have other championships, and they felt that Jericho was going to. Obviously, he made a deal to come back a couple of times, and they felt that Jericho on New Japan World helps New Japan World subscriptions, and it's good for the Japanese market, and he can, will he, he helped Omega. Will he help Naito? Internationally, maybe a little bit, and there's other people he can work with, Okada, Tanahashi. So, I mean, it's Ghetto's call, and more often than not, he's been right. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because right now with so many big shows, I sit here and go like, God, it would be really good if they had like whether it's a Tanahashi or Suzuki or somebody as Intercontinental Champion right now, or even Naito, and you could have one of those matches headline a show. That the IWGP title isn't headline, but you can't because Jericho's not working it. So maybe he's going to shoot an angle tonight for something for one of these shows, though. For all we know.
One more question, unrelated. I heard that they're going to have SummerSlam next year in Toronto.
Yes.
And I've never been to a WWE show, so wondering, should I go?
Well, you definitely should go to the Saturday night show, the NXT show. SummerSlam depends. It depends on who knows what's going to be there a year from now. I mean, but NXT's 95% like for sure going to be a good show. They have a great track record.
Yeah, I go to WrestleMania almost every year. I've never had a bad time at a WrestleMania. Like, even if the show sucks on TV, it's like fun being there at WrestleMania Live. I presume for SummerSlam it'd be the same. It'll be long.
Yeah, it's so long.
But yeah, for sure go to the NXT. I go to all the takeovers over Mania weekend, and they're always awesome.
You're gonna take her this year?
That's a good question.
I would go to ROH.
I mean, if I can.
You can't go to both.
As much of, yeah. We've run back and forth many times from ROH.
We did go to both.
Like
yeah.
literally running behind Dave as he sprints to get to the next building.
My name's Stan from Chicago. Can't do one of these without bringing up Conor, of course.
Conor McGregor.
Yeah, sure. What do you think the fight's actually going to get in the cage? I just have this gut feeling that it's not. And then also, win or lose, what do you think his future is? Because I mean, if he wins, he's going to have like the craziest amount of leverage with a cash flush company.
Oh, yeah.
And if he loses, I see probably a GSP super fight would probably be the most money. So, just what your thoughts about is it going to get in the cage and what his future is?
Well, I think that Conor will get in the cage. Khabib, I'm not so sure because Khabib may get hurt. As far as win or lose, I think that Khabib will be hurt a lot if he loses. I don't think Conor will be hurt a little if he loses, but not a lot. And he'll have, like you said, like GSP fight. Even if he loses, the GSP fight's going to be the biggest fight in UFC history. So he'll be okay for at least one fight and probably 5 or 6. Yeah, and then. But I mean, what's the odds of Khabib getting hurt between now and fight time? They're there. I mean, but the thing is, Ferguson's on the show, so there will be. Then Conor would fight Ferguson, which is also a great fight. What? Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that he's going to train and say I'm not going to fight. I mean, he could. He's got the leverage, and he may like hit them up for more money, but I think at the end of the day he's going to fight. So that's why Ferguson's booked on the show in case one or the other gets hurt. And if Conor gets hurt and Khabib's on the show, he'll fight Ferguson for sure. And we'll finally get that fight after 4 or 5 mistries. Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say that 2 of the best minds in the history of wrestling were Dusty and Pat Patterson.
In some way, in very different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that part of the reason for that is they both learned under great promoters, Pat being Roy and Eddie Graham.
Yeah, for sure.
So relating to that, I had always heard or understood that there was some sort of relationship between Roy, Eddie Graham, and Bill Watts, in the sense of, was there a booking relationship where someone booked under someone for a while, or was there a grand mind of the 3 of them where they learned under that person, or was there any?
Bill Watts learned from Vern Gagne, Ed Francis and Lord Blears, Roy Shire, and Eddie Graham. Those were like his people he learned from. As far as Eddie Graham and Roy Shire, I don't know of any connection. They did business together at the end, but they're very, very different bookers. I grew up watching both because my grandparents lived in Florida, so I would go to Florida all the time. And Eddie Graham, the Florida wrestling to me was much better than San Francisco wrestling, but San Francisco wrestling was better at building a big show. And Roy Shire, as far as week-to-week booking, that made sense. It made way more sense than Eddie Graham's booking. Eddie Graham relied a lot more on referee bumps over and over and over again. But Eddie Graham had a great territory, and he had great talent. I mean, he didn't pay the best, but Florida was a circuit that everybody wanted to work, so he took advantage of that. San Francisco in the 60s, everybody wanted to work because it was big money, but it wasn't like everybody wanted to work San Francisco. I mean, in Florida, you had for a wrestler, you had the beaches, and you had the women in the crowd, like things like that, and you were kind of local celebrities more than in San Francisco, really, just because of cultural things. So Florida was a promotion that a lot of guys really wanted to work, and Eddie Graham took advantage of that and had, Eddie Graham, the style of wrestling and the match quality of Eddie Graham's Florida in the 70s was really, really high.
So I've been reading Tim Horner's book on the NWA on the
Tim
territories.
Hornbacher.
Yeah, Hornbacher. Yes.
Yeah.
And kind of sticking with the Chicago theme, I kind of found a lot of that stuff fascinating. So kind of two separate questions. There was one part about Ed the Strangler Lewis. I guess he went into a restaurant and challenged someone. How much of that is a work and how much of that is a shoot? Like,
guys did that all the time.
Like, were they shooting their own angles, or was that planned out?
Both. But usually, if it's against another opponent, yeah, it's 99% of the time would be an angle. The one that wasn't was the Bruiser and Alex Karras, which actually started as an angle. I mean, the Bruiser just came in to build up a fight, build up a match with Alex Karras. And then it turned into like this big brawl at the Lindell AC. But the fight was very real. I mean, guys went to jail and everything. But he came in drunk, just wanting to build up a match. I mean, like the idea of in restaurants or something like that, wrestlers challenging guys, non-wrestlers to fights, or if guys came, I think you're fake, and then the wrestler beat them up. That wasn't unusual. I mean, it sounds so brutal now and ridiculous, but that's what they did back then. I mean, I talked to Terry. His father did that. If they were eating dinner, Terry's like 10 years old, and someone goes, "Oh, I think wrestling's fake," his father would just beat the hell out of him. And it's like, and he wouldn't have been the only one. It was like, and the mentality also was that, he couldn't just like take him down and rub his face in the ground. He had to beat the hell out of him, because Terry said that like his father's mentality was that if he didn't hurt the guy would go like, "He didn't hurt me," and he'd tell his friends, and it's like, he felt he had to hurt him bad to protect the business. And Eddie Graham had the same thing. I mean, it's so completely sadistic now, but it's a different world. You couldn't do it now, but that was the mentality of those guys. That's why those guys in that era, were really tough guys.
And then I was just curious, Fred Kohler ran the NWA and then kind of had a shaky relationship with them in the end.
Right.
I was wondering why the NWA didn't try to force Vern out when he was running the AWA, even though he was kind of separate from them, and there wasn't really a push to kind of try to take Chicago back from Vern.
Well, Vern and the NWA on a personal level, Vern and Sam Mushnick always got along. So when they started the AWA, while they were unhappy that there was another world champion, this was also during the period where the government was investigating them, and they weren't that unhappy in the sense of, well, we can prove we're not a monopoly because look at these guys, and we're not trying to run them out of business. So I think, and it was Vern, and Vern, they all worked together with the same talent. They weren't outlaws. The only negative about the AWA was that that Vern claimed he was the world champion, and the NWA did at that time want to have a fully recognized world champion that was recognized everywhere, but that fell apart in the 60s anyway.
Okay, so I live in Las Vegas, and regularly for the past 3 years, Ring of Honor does 2 shows for both, like
March and September, whatever. Yeah.
The Death of Fortis Honor coming up this month, and then the anniversary show, and those are by far the most fun shows to go to live. They're awesome. The TV taping the day after is fun. But I've tried watching Ring of Honor's TV itself, like at home, and the wrestling's good. The stories are not as good. If you were in charge of Ring of Honor or had to provide some advice, what do you think that Ring of Honor could do to improve their television specifically? Because their pay-per-views are great, but their TV is,
I think quicker turnaround time, for one thing, would put pressure on them, and the other thing is it's hard. I think
Well, it's weird because like NXT has had a string of like really good main events on television of late.
So
but
Ring of Honor does too, though.
Well, it's sort of the thing. It's like the TV is very similar.
Yeah.
Like it's if you take out some of the main events for NXT, it's a very simple, basic, nothing happening TV show.
Squash match.
Yeah.
The one thing I think that the NXT, the vignettes are better. Though.
Yeah. Maybe they could do better vignettes. I don't know. I don't see. I understand what you're saying about the Ring of Honor TV, but I don't see it being like hugely different from the NXT TV. Like the goal of the television is to do like a basic television show so that when you have your big event, it's exactly like you said. It's tons of fun. The pay-per-view is great and everything like that. Like if you try and do every TV show like that, you're taken away from your big events. So there has to be some sort of balance where, like the NXT show lately has been awesome because they have good vignettes, but then they've been having these. Like there was they gave a 5-star rating to a TV match for NXT for crying out loud.
That was a great match.
That's the kind of stuff you've been getting for the television. But there was a period for a while there where
I thought the NXT TV was really overrated.
Yeah,
for a
just
while.
watch TV and it's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with it. It was good, solid booking, but it wasn't like a great show.
But you know what? Okay, so the one advantage NXT has is they're constantly introducing new characters, and Ring of Honor hasn't introduced a lot of good new characters. You know, so I think that may be the key is just introducing more polished, good characters, which is hard because there's not an endless supply of them. But they probably could, scour the earth and try to bring more people in. But they may have. The one thing is between NXT and Ring of Honor right now is NXT has no budget concerns. Their whole thing is we can lose $10 million to make Triple H look like a good booker, and Ring of Honor can't do that. And I mean, it's so if look at the guys. Like if they kept Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish, and they got Matt Riddle and all this, Ring of Honor might have a fantastic TV show now. So.
Like my only thing is when we talk about wrestling on TV, everybody talks about how bad Raw is because it's bad. Talk about how SmackDown is okay because it's okay. Nobody talks about Ring of Honor's TV. We talk about Lucha Underground because it's really weird.
Yeah.
And we talk about NXT because everybody who watches NXT is like NXT's great.
Well, it's simple, basic, good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think you hit it right on the head talking about the main events with NXT. Like that's kind of what sets it apart. But there's also characters that I care about and believe in, and like I don't care about anybody except for maybe the top guys in Ring of Honor. Like I know a lot of people like Cheeseburger. I'm not a big fan of Cheeseburger. Punishment Martinez is fun to watch, but he's basically Baron Corbin, taller and more athletic. As far as
but that's not a bad thing. I would definitely like to see Baron Corbin more athletic and wrestle in those matches. Yeah.
I don't know. I want to like Ring of Honor because I love their shows and I want to watch and enjoy the alternatives, but like their TV's nothing special.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Robert from Las Vegas. I remember hearing on Jericho's podcast recently that he had pitched to Vince the IC title versus IC title at SummerSlam, and that eventually fell through. Vince didn't like the idea for whatever reason. With that,
I wouldn't think that Vince would want to put that championship up on his show.
Okay.
But I get that mentality. I'm not sure that it's the right mentality for 2018. I mean, I get where he comes from. I would have expected that he wouldn't do it, but I would kind of sit here and go, maybe it would cause a thing. But then, the whole thing with Vince is like, do I want people to then search out New Japan Pro Wrestling? And right now, I would say, no, I don't. So that's probably, a key thing.
Yeah, and that kind of falls into the thing, too, where it's like, is there a possibility somewhere in the future of there being another promotion that's not necessarily owned by WWE, because when WCW was acquired, then they just brought all the titles over. Is there a possibility of a interpromotional title versus title, not necessarily for the title, but match that would happen, whether it be IWGP, Ring of Honor, or some other promotion, Progress champion
in
coming
WWE?
in? Yeah.
Well, Progress, they could do it tomorrow, but I don't think they want to, that would be a big marketable match around the world yet. But as far as like with New Japan, it's not impossible because New Japan and WWE and WWF, and they have a history in the past of working together, so it's not impossible. But the mentality right now of both companies it'd be difficult. I think that there's I don't want to say jealousy is the right word, but people know about both. And I think that there's a thing from WWF where, New Japan actually has better wrestling. And from New Japan, there's the thing of WWF has really bigger stars. That makes it hard to work with each other right now.
And even a side thing with that, too, with Brock going back to UFC for a little bit, is it possible with him possibly picking up a UFC title that he would sign potentially a few dates with WWE while holding the UFC title and bringing that possibly on WWE TV?
I think it's possible. That would be a lot. That would be something that Vince and Dana would have to work out. I don't know that Dana would want the UFC championship on WWE television, but maybe he'd look and just go, well, it's just more exposure. I think that, put it this way, if it was Triple H's WWE, Triple H and Dana get along real well. I do think that there would be a stronger possibility of that, yeah. Yeah, not a takeover, though. Brock's not coming to take over.
So at the risk of opening up a can of worms, I know that given kind of current political issues between Canada and Saudi Arabia, do you think there's any issues with Kevin Owens or potentially Chris Jericho being banned from working the next Saudi Arabia show?
Well,
and if you think there is, do you think there's any coincidence with them announcing the first Canadian pay-per-view in ages? Are we going to get a Greatest SummerSlam 5 days after the one next year, or what do you think?
Well, they'll probably do like April again, but I mean, it's hard for me to predict because there's so many things in place that have nothing to do with pro wrestling that involve that. So I don't know. I think it is interesting if they don't like, they'll do the show, but they don't make it a big deal show. I mean, that's pretty telling too.
We'll have you guys be the last two.
All right, Jim from Appleton again. How viable would a program be between Christopher Daniels and Minoru Suzuki to see who's the meanest old bastard in wrestling?
Look, we know Christopher Daniels can promo like crazy, and we know that it's too bad that Suzuki doesn't speak English because his promos are also fantastic. But I mean, I think that from a promo standpoint and everything, I think they could pull that one off real well. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Diane from Toronto. So as I'm wandering around here this weekend, I'm seeing that maybe under 10% of the people here are women.
Yes.
As I try to check out women's wrestlers' tables, merch tables and stuff, I'm noticing it's not really about their athleticism. It's kind of more about
you're going to get me in so much
pin-ups.
trouble.
No. No. Yeah, my bad. My so incredibly bad. So they're offering pin-ups instead of stuff
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is, I really want to like women's wrestling. I feel like it's not necessarily written to appeal to women. It's more written to appeal to men with like a kind of juvenile mindset. I'm wondering if I really want to like women's wrestling. Like, is there somewhere I can start to find good women's wrestling that isn't about
Japanese women's wrestling? Stardom. They have a streaming service. It's really good. They have a couple shows every week that they put on. Stardom would be, it's all women's promotion.
Is it written by women? It feels like maybe there aren't many women writers in the field.
Well, I'll tell you what. Okay, so you made a point that was really interesting when you said that oh my God. I was summoned here. You were summoned here. Okay, so, well, just 1 second. What? Go ahead. Yeah. So I was friends with this guy's father, and this is the first time
Brian Pillman Jr.
Sneak in here real quick.
It's great to meet you.
Pleasure. Do you have 8x10s by any chance?
I do not. Okay, so the WWE absolutely believes that they are writing the women characters for both men and women, but they are only guys who are writing, so that's the disconnect. But like the women, I mean, it's much better than I don't know if were you watching like 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
No,
okay, well, you would be furious then because you were watching then.
I've seen matches from back then. It's all about petty bullshit. Sorry. It's all about petty nonsense. It's about like
Well, it's not even the storylines.
Even the storylines. It's this is my boyfriend, not your boyfriend. It's she's prettier than I am. She's younger than I am. This is the kind of garbage you see. Right?
Hey, you just saw that. I just saw that last week.
Fair.
But the thing is that for years, up until the last 3-4 years, they recruited women. A lot more. They recruited women. From bikini modeling catalogs, and we'll teach them to be competent or less than competent wrestlers. So that's what they thought. And then what happened was, a couple of the women that they trained that were second generation wrestlers, in a lot of cases, or Sasha Banks, Bailey, who just grew up as a wrestling fan. But some of those women, they somehow got jobs, and they were pretty enough to get jobs. But they really did have that mentality of wanting to be, as good a wrestler as Eddie Guerrero is or something. Where the other women, they didn't even dream of it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that that kind of when they started having those matches, there was a groundswell of people going like, "Hey, we would prefer this to this," and it kind of was the thing to do. But we're still. There's still remnants of that old business, and there's still the people who are running the business still have that mentality from the past that women's wrestling, because for 50 years that's what it was. It was just to appeal to guys and not for women. Mm-hmm. You've still got the remnants of that background type of thing. So that's, I think, where it is. It's better. It was like, if you're looking back at people now sometimes will go with and you guys all know, because you all saw it, like the Trish Stratus Lita days, like, the glory days Trish Stratus Lita. And it's like, some of those matches were okay. They weren't as good as the matches now, but the storylines and everything like that, they were pure crap. They were terrible. They were, if you were a woman, they would be offensive. They were offensive to me, but it's better. It's got a long ways to go. I think in 20 years it'll be much better off than it is now, because society will make it that way. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Okay, so where can you said a new Japan had some good
Stardom. So look up Stardom. Google Stardom, and then Stardom.world. Right? Is that what's it called? What's the Stardom World. It's a subscription site. It's what is it, like $7 a month? It's not that expensive, and they do the complete cards of every card, and it's a very athletic women's group, and a lot of the Americans go there and love to go there. They've got Nicole Savoy and Rachel Ellering's there right now, and people like that. So yeah, you'll like it. You'll like that a lot, I think. Yeah.
Tell the powers that be they need more women writers.
They do need more women
powers
writers.
That be.
Look, 40% of the audience is women, so it's like, and 2% of the writers are women, so there is going to be a disconnect. So how you doing?
Great, wonderful,
cool.
Grand.
Yeah.
I drove 5 hours from Cincinnati this morning, and I didn't sleep last night because I had a match last night.
Where at?
In Hanover, Indiana.
Oh, okay.
And I established my finisher.
What is it?
It is called the Dire Promise.
Uh-huh.
It is a swinging neck breaker with a cross arm hold. So look out for it on MLW next Friday and or Saturday. It would be on TV, beIN Sports USA on Friday, and then I'll be hitting my finisher on Saturday on YouTube. So you can decide how you would like to see me hit my finish.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to do one more question. Then if you want to come up and say hi to Brian and all that kind of stuff, we can do that. So
yeah, but seriously, they're $5 for each question.
Hi, Wade from North Dakota. I was just wondering, Dave, if there any truth to the rumor that was going around a couple months ago about possibly 2 WrestleManias next year?
No. I don't think that's more. No, that's more something where my thing was, after you watch a 7-hour show, like, wouldn't this be better for 2 3.5-hour shows? The energy would be better and all this. There's logistical nightmares of booking 2 straight nights and all that. It's going to be a very difficult move to make, but I just feel like, the people that come don't come for one day, they come for a week. So 2 3.5-hour shows to me is just superior to 1 7, but yeah, I don't expect that to happen.
How many of you guys have been here since Thursday? Nice. That's cool.
How about since yesterday?
I would have been here. I just had a match.
Okay.
Well, listen, we want to thank you so much for coming here today. We really appreciate it. Thanks for all the great questions, and
thank you for all coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope you have a great weekend. Hope you have fun at All In, and yeah. If you see us around, stop and say hi, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for all your support, and hopefully we'll see you next time.